The next part of this is the second part for the Teameem. I mentioned in the first part that there are two major purposes of Teameem. One is to know how to pronounce the word so that you actually make sure it's in the correct tense or the correct meaning of the word, rather than change the meaning if it's in the wrong, if the emphasis is on the wrong syllable. The second that I mentioned is to separate or bring together two words. So either the words have got to be separated with the Teameem that separate words, mafsikim, or they're brought together, mechubanim, mesharetim, brings two words together in the same thought. And let me give you an example. In Bereshit Yebet Pasuk Chayet, it says by Avraham Avinu that he built a Mizbeach, and then it says Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. The Teameem there under Vayikra B'Shem Hashem, Vayikra, there's a Tarha, and it's a pause after you say the Tarha. Listen to where I say it with the Teameem of the Adot Mizrach. Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. B'Shem Hashem is put together, and Vayikra is separated from those two because of the Tarha. Then you have a Ma'arich and a Sof Pasuk. The Ma'arich is a Ta'am Misharet. It is a subordinate Ta'am to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name afterwards. Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. Now, if you look in Shemot Lamed Daled Pasuk He, in Kitisa, after Ma'aseh HaEgel, Moshe Rabbeinu is pleading with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then the Pasuk comes and says, Vayikra B'Shem Hashem, same words, except the Teameem are different. Here you have, under Vayikra, a Ma'arich, under B'Shem, Vayikra B'Shem, a Tarha, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you have Hashem, which is a soft Pasuk. So here, Ma'arich is a Ta'am Mesharet, it's a subordinate Ta'am to the next one, B'Shem. So you read together, Vayikra B'Shem, Hashem Adoshem, instead of Vayikra B'Shem Adoshem. Here you're going to read Vayikra B'Shem Adoshem. This particular reading, according to Teameem, according to the Baalei HaMasoret, is based on, it's a remes based on the Gemara that's brought down in Gemara Rosh Hashanah, as to what really, who said what? Vayikra B'Shem Hashem. Did Moshe Rabbeinu say that? He said Hashem Hashem Kel Rahum V'Hanun, or did HaKadosh Baruch Hu say it? So here the Gemara over there says the following. Because we read it according to Baalei HaMasoret, Vayikra B'Shem, it's based on this Gemara to give a remes to this particular midrash in the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, it goes as follows. Rabbi Yochanan said, Mikra Katuv, if not for the fact that the words were written down this way, we can't interpret this way. מלמד שמתעטף הקדוש ברוך הוא כשליח ציבור, והראה לו למשה סדר תפילה. Moshe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, put on, it's as if, kaviyachol, put on a talit, and he taught, like a shaliach tzibur, and he taught Moshe Rabbeinu how to read, how to pray. In this case, Amalo, what kind of prayer? Kol zeman sheYisrael chotim, the tefillah is as follows. If Bnei Yisrael sin, ya'asu lefanai keseder hazeh v'ani mochel lahem. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Moshe, I'm going to tell you exactly how to ask forgiveness from me, and tell Bnei Yisrael to do it exactly this way. So, therefore, Vayikra B'Shem Adoshem, who called out Hashem Kel Rahum V'Hanun, the particular seder tefillah to ask forgiveness? HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu taught Hashem, the last word, Vayikra B'Shem, Hashem, Adoshem called out, not Moshe Rabbeinu. So if it had written Vayikra B'Shem Hashem, it would have been Moshe Rabbeinu calls out in the name, he calls out to God. But when you say Vayikra B'Shem Adoshem, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu called, he told Moshe, he called it. And he read Hashem, Hashem, he told him, Kel Rahum V'Hanun, and he taught Moshe Rabbeinu to tell Bnei Yisrael, when you're in trouble, when you sin, you say Hashem, Hashem, and then Amohel. So this midrash in the Gemara is based, it ends up being reflected with the Teameem that Baalei HaMasoret put in there. So they put in Vayikra B'Shem together, and Hashem, who called HaKadosh Baruch Hu, separate. Instead of Vayikra B'Shem Hashem, you would have thought Moshe Rabbeinu would have said it, the way Avraham Avinu said it. By the way, let me tell you that, in fact, there is an opinion the other way. that the Targum and follow the Rashi follows the Targum. He says, "Vayikra b'shem Hashem," who called Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though the Te'amim, Baalei HaMasoret, chose to follow the Midrash in the Gemara, Rashi, based on Onkelos, and of course they had a conflicting opinion. They didn't necessarily agree with what Rabbi Yohanan wrote down. Onkelos, he got it from Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Eliezer, they're mahloket. Many times we see in the Gemara that there's a dispute between the way we have the Te'amim, Baalei HaMasoret that put down, and the way the Gemara wrote it. So in fact, you could say that in that case, that Onkelos, he received it from Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Eliezer early on, that it was Moshe Rabbeinu who spoke. And Vayikra b'shem Hashem, Moshe Rabbeinu called out Hashem Kol Rachum Hanun. But according to Rabbi Yohanan, later on, the Moraim who wrote it down, Rabbi Yohanan, he says, no, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Midrash is HaKadosh Baruch Hu did it, and therefore the Baalei HaMasoret, they follow what's in the Gemara according to Rabbi Yohanan, not according to what the Targum wrote. Now, I said before, one other thing a major thing, that the Te'amim basically tell you how to pronounce the word. On the first syllable, the last syllable, the second, the syllable before the last, both of those would have been called Milarel. Milarel is on the last syllable. There are 4 Te'amim, that don't necessarily tell you and dictate how to pronounce the word, because they're always found in a fixed position, regardless of the word itself. So how do you know how to pronounce these words? You got to look for other Te'amim with that same word in order to teach you this. The Menhachai brings down this rule in general with the word Vekacha Tochelu Oto in Perek Shemot Yudbet Pasuk Yud Aleph in Parashat Bo. Vekacha Tochelu Oto. There are 4 Te'amim that always are in a fixed position. 3 of them are in the last syllable. 1 is always on the first syllable. So the ones on the last syllable, because those are the majority, a Zarka, a Segolta, and then also the other third one is the Tarsa. The Tarsa, or some will call it Telisha Ketana, the Ashkenazim call it. Those 3 are always found in the last syllable. So, for example, on the word Vekacha, the pronunciation, the way I said it, is on the first syllable. But if you look in the Tikkun, you look in the Te'amim, the Zarka that's on that word is on the last syllable, always that way. But you don't read the word Vekacha with emphasis on the last syllable, you read it Vekacha. And the same thing, Shemot, Yudbet, Kaf Gimal, the word Mitzrayim, the Segolta, on the mem is always on the last syllable, on the mem on the last syllable. But we don't read the word Mitzrayim, we read it Mitzrayim. So that's considered Milarel, the syllable before the last. So the Segolta is always on the last. It doesn't move, depending on how you pronounce the word. And also you see the word Mitzrayim with the Zarka in Shemot Yudbet, Pasuk Yudbet. Again, the Zarka in that case is always on the last syllable. So how do we know how to pronounce the word? Baalei HaMasoret gave us a tip. They said, they determined the following. Because those 3 are always on the last syllable, if the pronunciation of that word is not on the last syllable, we're going to put another ta'am, a second, in other words, a duplicate of what that ta'am is on the particular syllable, the particular havara, where the word should be pronounced. So, Vekacha, what you're going to find, if you look in the Tikkunim, sometimes now they bring it in the Hamash too. If you look at Tikkunim, there's 2 Zarkas. The first Zarka is the real Ta'am, which is on the end, the last syllable. But Baalei HaMasoret wanted to teach you that, you don't read it Vekacha, you read it Vekacha. They put another Zarka over the first Kaf, on the first syllable. The same thing, Mitzrayim. Segolta is always on the last syllable, on the mem sofit. But we don't read it Mitzrayim, Milera, we read it Mitzrayim, Milarel. On the syllable before the last, there's another Segolta that they placed over the Resh in order to teach you that you pronounce it Mitzrayim, not Mitzrayim. Same thing, Shemot Yudbet, Pasuk Yudbet. Mitzrayim, you have 2 Zarkas. The first Zarka is the real Ta'am, which is always on the last syllable. But this first, the one they put in another Zarka to teach you that you should read the word on the next to emphasize the next to the last syllable, not the last one. So there are two zakas. Now, there is a ta'am, and then of course you have the tilisha gedola, what's called a talsha by the Sfaradim. Ashkenazim will call it tilisha gedola. It's in the beginning that the talsha is always on the first letter, always on the first letter. But for example, if it's pronounced on the second letter, you'd have, or the third syllable, you'd have two talshas, two telisha gedola, two talshas, one on the first syllable where it really is fixed and belongs, and the other one to tell you how to pronounce that word. Now, there's one case where there's a little difference between Ashkenazim and Sfaradim about this. A kadma or a pashta is always found on the last letter, always, and the pronunciation goes with it. But according to the Sfaradim, there is another separately called ta'am, which is called kadmi, two kadmas. So you have a kadma on the last syllable, and then you have another kadma on either the previous syllable or maybe even the first syllable. So how do you pronounce, when you have a kadma, you have two kadmas, how do you pronounce it? You pronounce it mila'el. You pronounce it with the first kadma, not with the second kadma. The second kadma is always by itself. That's the way you pronounce those words. When you have kadme, when you have two kadmas, you pronounce the word with the first or the syllable before the last. So, for example, we'll say it this way, the nigun. Kadme, not kadme, kadme. The emphasis is on the syllable before the last syllable, and for us, that's considered, Sfaradim, that's considered a separate ta'am. And according to Minhachai, also a separate ta'am. Ashkenazim say, no, that's in the same realm as the double zakah and the double sigolta. That it's really this, it's a kadma, but if when the word is pronounced mila'el, not milera, not on the last syllable, they put another kadma in there to teach you that it's on the first. We have a separate and different, for example, a different singing of those ta'amim. You say kadma, pashta, but kadmi, the sound is different. So for us, it's a separate, different ta'am, but it does serve the same purpose. The kadmi, the pronunciation is on the first or syllable before the last, not on the last one. Kadma is always on the end. Sometimes it's called a pashta. It's always on the end. So I think I've given you a brief description of the purpose of the ta'amim, the main purposes of the ta'amim, and how one should check to make sure that your pronunciation is correct, rather than change the meaning, change the tense, change the meaning of the word, and also how to put words together or separate them appropriately.